Hi, folks, and welcome to the Salty Seaman Tales from Retirement. Thought I'd go a little bit back the other way for a minute. Talk about the two different times I got out of the Navy. First time I was a regular separation for 6 years, and I'll follow up with from when I retired just last year. And just those two tales for now. If I feel there's some stuff for some tales from retirement and dealing with the military that I've experienced in the last year and a half, I might go into those. To start off with, I think it's good to preface with the fact that I did get out of the Navy at one point after my first 6 years, and just everything that went into that and coming back in. So in late 2001, my 6 years altogether was coming up in the Navy. I had re-enlisted for 2 in Japan. Spoiler alert, those of you following along on Tales from the Fleet. But I did 2 more years. I just married a foreign spouse, and I wanted to have some stability for our first couple of years in the States. So I took shore duty in Lemoore, California. I worked at an admin, or for the admin for the schoolhouse. There was a F-18 schoolhouse, like a C school in Lemoore, and obviously there's also the air base, which I rarely saw. I was on the admin side most of my time. But I did my 2 years there. It was fairly unnotable. Future, I might talk a little bit about some of my experiences there, but nothing really to write home about. But I did get out of the Navy the first time there. You know, I had my division officer wasn't very keen on it. You know, he was very right in thinking I'd want to come back, but gave me a really good out the door eval, supported me. All that good stuff. Said I'd done a great job, and they helped me out with what they could. Now, back then, like I said, I got out on the base I was working on. I don't know what the rule is now for stateside people when they get out. They stay in the same base, but back then you could. Meanwhile, of course, overseas always had to come back to the States. But in this case, I did all my checking out there, and I went through TAPS, or what used to be called TAPS, Transitional Assistance Program. So I ended up going through TAPS pretty late. It just took me a minute to get around to it, and it ended up being about a week and a half before I was due to go on terminal leave. First day of TAPS class was September 11th, 2001. Yes, that's September 11th. Now, I had, of course, barely got into class. I'd heard stuff on the radio. I wasn't really sure what was going on. I thought it was a building in Fresno caught fire because I was just half paying attention to the radio. And of course, I get into class and 9/11 was going on. And we still went through TAPS class, so we were told, well, maybe you're not getting out now, because no one really knew what was going on. So TAPS was very distracting, just going through 9/11 and its aftermath during that week. With the veterans office couldn't come, which is like a big part of TAPS. It's kicking on base. We were stuck in Delta. We were locked down as far as could be. Luckily, we lived on base, so the morning traffic was a nightmare coming in all that week and the next week, because they were doing full searches of everything. And we were just all distracted. I mean, just what's going on in the country. We were asking questions, is they're putting a hold on anyone getting out? I still had 2 more years of IRR after that. And, whatever came, what was to come, what was to come. But in the meantime, I was pressing forward with my plan. If I was to stay or be recalled, so be it. So nothing of that came, of course. They did do that to some people, and then super critical places, intelligence, linguists, a few other jobs, I'm sure, at least on the Navy side. Can't speak for the other services, but do you remember they just switched over. The Marines no longer were doing security, and the Navy had just switched over, taken over for the Marine wing. But they put the Marines right back on when the shit went down. So, that'll tell you something. I don't know what, but probably something right there. But I mean, long story short, they had the way more experience and they're fucking Marines. So I thought it was a good move myself. Now, during all this, we decided to move ourselves, which was the most idiotic thing I ever done in my naval travels, I think. Something I would never, ever, ever do again. I know some people do that, and good on you, but, I mean, at least back then, we just didn't have that much shit. The biggest issues was, disassembling the bed, I think. But overall, we had to get a U-Haul and a trailer to haul my piece of shit car from Lemoore, California to Douglasville, Georgia. And then such a piece of shit, we ended up selling it immediately. I got it off the lemon lot when I first moved there. We just moved from Japan. It was our first car together, first place, first everything. And, of course, we do the dumb thing and go to a place right off base and get a shitty car. Locked in a really crappy deal for 2 years. But we had a trailer for that. We had like a mid-sized truck. We packed up everything ourselves, and then we drove all the way across the country with 2 cats. And, hauling a trailer behind me in a large truck, and I'm not really, never drove big trucks before. Now I'm driving them for, close to a week. My wife was scared to death of the thing. She was definitely not going to drive it, so kind of left me. And, trick to it is just sticking on the big main highways and, when you're pulling into, like, easy access off turnpikes. Don't try anything fancy. I stopped and saw my friend Brett, who I've talked about on the other one, in Missouri for a night. And other than that, yeah, we came to my parents' house where we spent the next 6 months, way longer than we expected. But, we got there, put our stuff in storage, and, started looking for work. I was kind of looking at college to use my GI Bill, but I never took that seriously. Like, something was just getting me to get back to work, have my own place, and I guess kind of show my, full independence from anything military or my parents. Luckily my parents are very cool with it and just loved having me back, and they love my wife and all that fun stuff. So, cats weren't happy because of their cats and their dog, and they're kind of prisoners for 6 months, but sometimes animals integrate better than other times, I guess. But regardless, we ended up with, we both got jobs around the November time frame. And they're actually both pretty close together out on Cobb Parkway. If you're from the Atlanta area, you know what I'm talking about. And I had a job. I was a QA for a mortgage refinance company. A suit and tie job, paid pretty decent for essentially I had basic admin skills kind of job. The pay was pretty good, and there was overtime. And I did that for a month, and we were about to sign for an apartment right there on Cobb Parkway. Moved out with my parents, and I got unceremoniously laid off before they started. They kicked me from temporary to full account. I guess I wasn't working out for one way or the other. I think they hired too many people, and I happened to be one of the ones that went on the chopping block. So, it's kind of heartbreaking, but, what are you going to do? But at the same time, like, just because I'd gone 6 weeks without getting a job at that point anyway, I was already looking to go back in the Navy. So obviously, I think all along I was going to go back in some capacity. If I'd stayed at that job, and after a while, I think I would have gone reserves, more than likely, and who knows. But, my local recruiter already had all my stuff on file, so once I called him the day I got laid off. I called him first thing when I got home, before I told my parents or my wife what had happened, because it was cell phones. Just call them at work or wait till they get home back then. Cell phones were cell phones, but it just wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. But it was, you think you're what they call you a retread. You kind of think coming back in is a lot easier than first joining, especially when you only have less than a year out. At this point, looking at a couple of months altogether, 3 months. And no, it was an incredible pain in the ass, and I wasted so much goddamn time waiting to come in. And then before I ever got to the fleet, I spent a long goddamn time And it is a fucking, just a comedy of, I wouldn't say errors, but just a comedy of bureaucracy possibly, and a couple of fuck ups and one hand not talking to the other kind of things. But well, regardless, it started off going through, the recruiter in MEPS again. Older, wiser, already been through this shit kind of guy that I was. I wanted to keep, at the time I was in E4, third class, I wanted to keep it, but I wasn't going to stay a yeoman. Like that just wasn't an option for me. One of the main reasons I got out is because I just really wasn't the Navy, it was more the job. And that job wasn't for me for 20. So my original idea was to go back as an IS. I had the intelligence specialist. I had lots of friends on the Blue Ridge that were ISs, and it seemed like a really cool job. For what they did, they could tell me. And what I just kind of gathered they did, I thought that was really cool. And they said, hell yeah, definitely no problem. Had to retake the ASVAB, and I only scored 2 more points. So about the same as I did 7 years prior. So I didn't get any dumber or smarter once I came back in, and totally qualified for an IS. They said it's wide open. There should be no issue keeping your E4. But then there was, just this constant holdups. Like we need a waiver, and then it's like, oh, you need to go talk to the CO of MEPS. Like, oh, and she's a pain in the ass. She wants to ask you about your tattoos and your piercings. I'm like, I got the tattoos in the Navy, and the piercings were pre-existing when I came in the first time, so what the hell? She was just, I don't know what was wrong with that woman, but from what everyone told me, it worked at MEPS, and my own recruiter, she was just a hard ass about that stuff and kind of a cunt. But I never met her. Like I ended up going to MEPS like 4 or 5 fucking times over this shit, and like there was a snowstorm one time and it got canceled, and I went for an interview that never happened, and I spent way too much time sitting at that stupid MEPS. And finally comes in, yeah, you can keep your E4, and also now it's time to classify. And of course I say yes, and now that I'm talking, first I say yes, IS, that's what I want. And my the detailer's first one kind of looks at me funny. Everyone else has been like, oh my god, yeah, that's your smooth sailing. And he's like, I don't think they're taking prior enlisted. Now that's kind of fucking weird. You'd think, why would someone care? Especially talking about people who, already served honorably and might already have a clearance of some sort, which I did. I had a secret clearance. But no, they didn't want prior service. They were only taking new guys. That might be an intel thing. I don't know. And I've heard later that they did, but at that time, no, that was the policy. So anything else you wanted, he recommended one of the crypto tech rates. And I had also pointed out, I was like, yeah, the journalist job always sounded good, but I just heard like what a very tiny career field it was, and it was almost impossible to get into. But yeah, it turned out there was an opening, and he told me, and somehow I was so crestfallen from not getting IS, I'm sitting there looking at CT stuff, and then just kind of woke up like, wait, you said journalist was open? Like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll take it. Okay, it's like you got to take a typing test, and like that for journalism you had to take a typing test before you went to the school, and I was like, I was next yeoman. He's like, all right, I'll just write down you passed. And then it was just waiting and waiting and waiting for that damn waiver to actually go through all the way to processing. We finally done, it's all done. At this point it's March. I'm sitting around doing fucking nothing because it's even worth it to get a job, because I can be called any week now, as I'm being told, and like you're shipping out next week or whatever. So a lot of sitting around my house doing nothing. I felt kind of useless. I wasn't providing anything. My wife was working and kind of mooching off my parents. And I was ready to go. And so finally, the fateful day comes in. It's like the middle of March 2002. And what happens for retreads, like you don't go back to boot camp, which I always get asked about, and just let no. It's so pointless to send someone back to boot camp. It's just, you'd be more trouble than you're worth, because, why? You already learned all that stuff, and you're going to be a detriment to all the new guys, because you've I already know everything, and here, don't listen to them, and it's a terrible idea. I think pretty much only the Marines are I think the Army does stipending. But yeah, the Marines are pretty much the only ones who make you go through it. Like, again, if you come from another service, and definitely for retreads, yeah, you don't go through the same service boot camp again. But regardless, no, for Southeast you go to Jacksonville, Florida, and you sit in another TPU there until you get orders to your duty station or A school if you're switching jobs like me. So I was down there with a bunch of another TPU full of medical hold, legal holds, and this place a lot of retreads, and a couple of Oz vets, other service veterans. There's a couple ex-Marines there, I think an ex-Army. Interesting, there's a brig there, so they would send. Before I get ahead of myself, before I left, no, I did not. Still didn't get to keep my E4, that waiver I'd been waiting around for 3 months. It's like, yeah, you're authorized to keep it, but this job field doesn't have any openings, so you got to come into JOSN. I'm like, they told me this last minute. Like, I'm about to drive down to Florida, and I'm like, fine, what the fuck ever. I can make third class back fairly soon. So, and it was another year, but regardless, so I drove down to Jacksonville and said the TPU's there. There's a brig there, and here's pretty interesting. Also, people coming back from UA. There's a shit ton of UAs. Talking about legal holds, a bunch from the JFK at the time, which just had a series of terrible events and just morale was low, and they just had like hundreds of UAs. We had a bunch of those guys coming back while the ship was on deployment, and you had a bunch of like longtime UAs, AWOLs, deserters. A guy from the 70s, and it was because they changed some. The 9/11 had already changed so much with like, it was a lot easier to get caught, especially if you're traveling. Hey, one guy had been living in South Africa since the 80s, and he wanted to come for an event, so he just said, so I just turned myself in, because if you turn yourself in, you get to walk free while you get processed out, and if they catch you, you sit in the brig till they process you out. So it was an interesting mix down there, and it's a part of the bureaucracy in action. I was there 4 months waiting for school. Most of the guys I started out there with were gone in a month. And just, I finally get to my A schools in Maryland, Fort Meade, and then that way another 4 months there because we never got word that you were getting a seat. Like VPERS might have had it, but they never told the schoolhouse. So 4 months wasted Jacksonville, now another 4 months in Fort Meade before I finally took a 6-month course and finally went back out to the fleet. A month and some change since I came back in. So that's just a little tale of how getting out and coming back in can suck just a little bit. Now the separation side was pretty easy on this one. It was more the getting back in that was the comedy of mismanagement and bureaucracy bullshit. Next time on Tales from Retirement, I'll tell you how I processed out to retirement just over a year and a half ago. So stay tuned for that. And that'll probably be it for the Tales from Retirement for now. I'll go back to Tales from the Fleet. So, that might be my next one actually. So, if you like it, please subscribe. Give the video a like. Ring the bell. Hit all the switches YouTube's making everybody do now. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you freaks later. Peace.